Psalm 137 verse 1 to 9 through the Bible. Psalm 137, Part 1. Theme: Singing the Lord's Song in a Strange Land. Reading through the book of Psalms is like driving on a divided highway through some lovely section of the countryside. We pass through new and beautiful scenery with a spectacular landscape on each side. The beginning of each psalm is like coming to an intersection. We casually observe the highway marker, but we proceed at the same speed, and we have the feeling of sameness. On each side of the highway marker, the view is very much the same. That is true, especially after we leave Psalm 119. As we are traveling along the highway, all of a sudden, we come to Psalm 137. When we come to this psalm, we begin to slow down because we see down the highway that 3 flares have been thrown down. In fact, these 3 flares are telling us to stop. Look, listen. By way of introduction, will you note these 3 flares? The first one is marked stop. As we come to this psalm, we find that it is designated an imprecatory psalm. Somebody says, well, a flare with that word on it wouldn't make me stop because I wouldn't know what it meant anyway. May I say to you that imprecating simply means that it is a psalm that pronounces a curse. It is a psalm that voices a prayer or a wish for vengeance. Listen to this concluding verse. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. That is a red flare, let me tell you. It is a shocker, and it causes a great deal of difficulty. Many folk detour around it. In fact, it would be very easy for me to avoid it, but I feel that this psalm is one that we should stop and look at. There are several ways men have of dealing with this psalm. The liberal critics deal with it very simply. They reject it. They say that it does not belong in the Bible. It expresses feelings that are contrary to what they think it ought to say. Therefore, they reject it. Of course, the method of the higher critic is to take out of the Bible what he likes and reject what he does not like. He is like the simple-minded country boy who bought a cow. After he had bought the cow, he learned it cost something to feed the front end of the cow, but he got the milk from the back end of the cow. He decided to concentrate on the back end and forget about the front end so he could make more money. You know what happened? His cow died. But he was a higher critic. Higher critics take what they like and reject what they do not like. This philosophy does not satisfy, nor does it solve the problem at all. Then there is another way of dealing with this. There are those who say, in a naive sort of way, I believe the Bible from cover to cover, yet they are ignorant of what is between the covers. This is the reason those of us who are conservative are accused of being anti-intellectual. Multitudes of conservative folk claim to believe the Bible, but are ignorant of it. This is the reason I put such an emphasis on teaching the Word of God. It is one thing to say you believe it. It is another thing to know what it says. This leads us to the third viewpoint. It is to believe the Bible from cover to cover and attempt to understand it. It is to determine what God's meaning is, to discover what He had in mind when He recorded certain things. I want to know what I am believing and be able to give a reason for the hope that is in me. Therefore, with this attitude, let us come to Psalm 137, an imprecatory psalm. Although it expresses something here that sounds very terrible on the surface, let's look at it and see what it really says. The second flare tells us not only to stop, but to look. That is, Psalm 137 deals with a particular portion of the history of God's chosen people. It is an historical psalm, which is very unusual. The historical books of the Old Testament do not record the history of the nation Israel during the 70 years of captivity in Babylon. There is no record of that captivity. It is true that Jeremiah prophesied about it, but he did not go with the captives to Babylon. Ezekiel was in Babylon, but he was prophesying to the captives there. We can only draw by inference the conditions of the people. He was concerned more with his visions than he was with history. Also, Daniel was in Babylon during that period, but he was in the court, prophesying to the Gentile rulers. We have no record from him at all concerning the captives. The 70 years of Babylonian captivity are a period of silence. It is a vacuum. It is a void as far as the historical books are concerned. The 2 books of Kings and the 2 books of Chronicles bring us right up to the Babylonian captivity and the destruction of Jerusalem. The next historical books, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, pick up the story after the 70-year captivity is over and the people are back in their land. The captivity in Babylon is passed over because in God's plan his clock stops when his people are out of their land. For this reason, we have no record of this period. This fact gives great emphasis to Psalm 137 because it is a bridge over the Grand Canyon of silence. It is like a vista point along the highway where you can pull off the road and look at scenery you have never seen before. We don't see very much, but we see something of this silent period. Then the third flare that has been thrown down is listen. It is a question that has been raised. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Psalm 137 verse 4. I'm not sure that this question can be answered for these people. I'm not sure today that it can be answered for you and me unless we are willing to meet certain conditions. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Psalm 137 records the tragic yet tender experience of these people during the 70 years of captivity. You will find in this psalm bitter hatred and deep love. You will find a people that are overwhelmed and overpowered by their emotions. They feel very deeply about what is recorded here,